Hi, very good morning to everyone who's tuning in on Facebook Live, either through our Pioneer community page or my personal Facebook community page. And this morning we have with us Malathi. Later she'll share a bit more about what she does, but I think more importantly, this morning we're going to speak on this topic on matrimonial disputes. It's part of our series here in through this Connect and Pioneer series. We started this 3 months ago, so we hope to do one of these kind of series every 3 months with a focus on legal topics and issues. Just about 3 months ago, we had a similar webinar on the law of wills, probate, and power attorney, with Josephus. And now, here with us today, as we all know, International Women's Day is just around the corner. So I just wish all of you out there, our ladies and our women, happy International Women's Day. But more importantly, here at this Connect Pioneer series, we are bringing some useful tips, legal tips for our residents, as well as I know, as this morning's event is also in partnership with the Labour Movement. Some of my union leaders and union members are also tuning in. So I bid a very warm welcome to all of you who are tuning in live here. We are projecting you here from one corner in Frontier Community Club. And it's part of also a series that we are doing through the LEAP initiative here in Pioneer Constituency. A couple of months back, we started this LEAP initiative. It's called LEAP. LEAP stands for Legal, Employment and Employability at Pioneer. It's sort of an acronym of sorts. Basically, we know many of our residents here, because of COVID-19, has faced a series of issues from employment-related ones with job losses, retrenchments and layoffs. At the same time, also with more of us working from home, more disputes happening. We do see a rise in the issues in amongst our residents here. So I am sure some of you may have some burning questions. Besides neighbourly disputes, also sometimes even family and matrimonial disputes. So these are very important topics. We are really pulling the bull by its horns and trying to address some of these issues. And of course, where possible, we try to prevent them from happening as well. And so through this LEAP initiative, we hope to bring to you sort of legal primers in a very simple, digestible format. This morning, before I hand the mic or the screen over to Malathi, we will have a short Q&A after Malathi sharing. So she'll be taking us through some final points in this area of matrimonial disputes. It's a very, very wide area, so we try to give you in a very digestible format so that all of you out there, residents, union leaders, union members, can benefit from some of these simple tips and guides. Because, not to worry, both the Labour Movement as well as the Pioneer Constituency, we actually work very closely with the Law Society Pro Bono Services Office. With their support, also run legal clinics, both in NTUC as well as here in Pioneer Constituency in our Frontier Community Club. So we do it monthly. So we have these channels. If you need to, if you face some of these issues that you hear today, and you want to take a step further to get some advice, both clinics are free of charge, and you can access to those services as well. So a big thank you to many of our volunteer lawyers, including Malathi, powering our legal clinics, and of course all our primer series. I'm very grateful to them for taking time off their precious weekends, as well as sometimes weekday nights, away from family and all their own personal commitments, to be here, including many of our volunteer lawyers who are helping at our legal clinics for our residents. So a big thank you to them, a big group of them for coming forward. So if any of you out there who are keen to share a topic and really be part of our volunteer team, please do drop us a message, drop us a line, or even in comments on our Facebook pages. So without much further ado, I would like to hand the screen, the time over to Malathi. Malathi, for those of you in the legal fraternity will know, she's such a well-known figure in the area of women advocacy, supporting women issues, and in particular, a very seasoned and very leading practitioner in the area of family law. So, coincidentally, I shouldn't say senior, but we are also from the same college, and in the East, both of us live in the East. So, and like I said, she's been doing a lot of pro bono work for Law Society pro bono services, as well as many other groups in the community. So we are so honored to have her with us this morning for us to pick her brains as well later at the Q&A. But at the same time, also I will now hand the mic and screen over to her for her to share more on this very, very important topic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Malathi.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It's always a pleasure to speak to the community, and I do want to start off by thanking Pioneer CC, as well as Pioneer constituency, Patrick and his team for putting this together. As Patrick mentioned, law awareness has always been something very close to my heart. I was Law Society's pro bono ambassador a couple of years back, and I've always continued to want to give back to the community by ensuring that everybody knows what there is to know in terms of legal issues, because it is only with the knowledge and the awareness that you can then make considered decisions, not just for yourself, but also for your family, as well as your loved ones. So that is very important. So initiatives like what we are doing this morning is certainly very, very useful. And I think from a standpoint of a legal practitioner, I always am concerned that families may be making decisions that will impact not just on themselves, but also on their children, without the benefit of knowing what the law is. So one very big area of the work that we do is with respect to law awareness, and wanting to make sure that we put it in a way that is, as Patrick says, in bite-sized pieces, easily digestible. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with you this morning in the next half hour or so, and then I'll continue to take questions from all of you. So let's just move on to, I have some slides this morning to walk us through. Okay, so what are we talking today about today? I basically will be concentrating on matrimonial disputes. But when we say matrimonial disputes, we don't just talk about sort of an adversarial, having to get out there in court, and then it's sort of like have to fight for your rights, and all that. It also encompasses knowledge, all right? Forewarn is always a good thing, all right? You can prepare, all right? And then you can make choices. So what I'm going to be doing today, right, is to sort of give you an overview of what kind of matrimonial and family disputes there can be, all right? And this would cover things like divorce, separation, asset division, financial issues. Basically, what I like you to do is to sort of provide you with some tools, all right, or some tools in a toolbox to take ownership of your dispute, so that you are the one who is in control, right? Because it's when you don't have the knowledge that you then have to depend on other people to steer the ship. But if you have the knowledge of how to do things, then you can make a decision, right, as to which direction your dispute can take. And then, of course, one of the very, very important areas which I feel very close to is how children are impacted in matrimonial disputes. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time to talk about that. Also to cover some recent trends in family violence. As mentioned by Patrick, as a result of COVID-19, many of us are working from home, children are doing home-based learning. So suddenly the home has become your school, the home has become your office, and of course, tensions arise as a result of that, because all of a sudden, a lot of movement takes place within the home and within the confines of the home, with all the challenges that it brings. I would also like to highlight that there are, of course, the legal and judicial systems that is there to resolve your disputes, because marriage brings with it status, all right? You are now no longer just the individual, but you're also a father, a mother, a husband, a wife, all right? And with all of that status, right, there'll be rights as well as responsibilities. So when it comes down to it, and if you can't resolve the matter yourself, then you have to rely on the legal and judicial systems to help you. But there are limitations on this. And that is why increasingly we are moving towards trying to encourage people to take ownership of their dispute by considering more collaborative and cooperative ways of dispute resolution, otherwise also known as mediation. And finally, some of you must have heard, all right, in the news, this whole concept of therapeutic justice. So it's not a therapy, okay? But what it is actually trying to see when we apply the legal system, right? How can we do this, especially in relation to families, in a healing way to help families heal? Because once the lawyers close their files and the judges finish their case and take off their robes, our lives will just move on. But it is the families who have to continue to adapt to this new life that they have made for themselves, all right? For children suddenly having to toggle between two households, etc. So what are we trying to do is to ensure that any kind of divorce, right, doesn't negatively impact the family, especially the children. So with that, on matrimonial and family disputes, all right, in Singapore, we still need to prove some facts, all right, before you can file for divorce, okay? And the facts include adultery, and it has to be the other person's adultery, okay? It can't be your adultery, and then you commit adultery and then say, okay, I now want a divorce based on my own adultery. And then the other one is unreasonable behaviour. If the other party has behaved in a way that's unreasonable for you to continue to live with the person, all right? Or if you have been deserted, all right, for a period of 2 years, that means you've been left behind, you and your child has been left behind, right? And then the third and the fourth reasons are actually non-fault based, all right? This is, so 3-year separation if the other party consents to the divorce, or else then you wait out 4 years and then you can file for a divorce based on the separation. Also note that during the first 3 years of marriage, you can't file for divorce unless you can show exceptional hardship or exceptional depravity or bad behavior on the part of the other person, right? Now, the whole point of this is because the law recognizes that marriage comes with it having to adapt to the other party. And of course, this will take time. So it requires you to at least live with the other person for a period of 3 years before you start thinking about wanting to file for divorce, okay? But because of that, it doesn't mean that if you really, really can't live with the person, you have to continue to do that, all right? I mean, I talk about this particularly in the context of, say, family violence, all right, and very, very bad behavior on the other party's part. So there is this concept of a deed of separation, which you can enter into, and maybe we can talk a bit about that a little later. In more recent years, we've begun to find that where we encourage people to come up with their own solutions in how to solve their problem, right? So whether it's the ground for divorce, or whether or not you can come to an agreement with your on your children issues, on maintenance, all right, or as well as even just dividing up your assets or your property, right? If all of those things can be resolved, right at the start, even before you file for the divorce document, then you can file something called a simplified writ of divorce. And this actually is really admirable because parties really have to work very, very hard in the background, right, to come to an agreement. You can see lawyers and get lawyers to help you to do this as well. But what it basically means is that by the time you file the divorce, all right, it's all nicely wrapped up in a little package, and then you get it filed. The court then approves it, right, and then you wait out the divorce hearing, which is uncontested, and then you have a period of 3 months, right, between the initial divorce interim judgment that's given, and then After the 3 months, you get your final judgment. All right. So no further arguments, no further legal cost having to be incurred because you all are having issues that you still have to resolve through the courts. Okay. So this is a very desirable way, all right, to consider, right, when you are thinking about a divorce, in order for you to do it in a sort of path of least resistance, all right, in a way that is basically easily resolved, all right, and when you can move on with your lives, all right, and heal. Now, as I mentioned earlier, right, there are generally two parts to the divorce, right? There is the interim judgment, which is usually given after you've shown or you have proven the reason for the divorce, okay? So that just deals with the first part, all right? Sometimes clients tell me, oh, so I hear there's part one, part two, all right? So this is basically it, all right? After part one is over, you get an interim judgment, right? And then if there are still issues haven't been resolved on children, on money like maintenance, and on property, right? These are what we call ancillary matters, okay? So the lawyers will say AM, all right? So that's basically stands for ancillary matters, all right? Or other matters, all right? It's legal speak, all right? But basically that's what it covers. Now, also note that because as a nation, we are very concerned about the impact of divorce on children. Where there are children under 21 years, and if your matters with respect to the children haven't been resolved, that means if you and your spouse haven't decided who is going to, where the children going to be living after this, right? Who's going to get to see the children during the weekend? What time are we going to work out? How are we going to divide up holidays, public holidays, etc.? Then what happens is, even before you file the divorce papers, you have to attend mandatory counseling. Okay, now this is not something you have to do together with your spouse. Okay, so even if you're just thinking about it, all right, my suggestion is sign up. All right, there are online facilities. You can go to the MSF website, all right, and you can sign up for this mandatory counseling, because what it does at the mandatory counseling session that is held at the Divorce Support and Specialist Agency is to give you an idea of what divorce is going to be like, especially on how it's going to impact on your children. Okay, so and then after you've completed this mandatory counseling, you will then receive a certificate, and that certificate will need to be filed together with your divorce papers, right? If by the time of filing you haven't sorted out your children's issues. Okay, now after you file for divorce, if the children issues are still not resolved, then there's also a mandatory mediation session that you will have to go through in the courts. Now, this one will involve the other party, because of course by this time the other party knows you've already filed for divorce. Okay, so this takes place at a Child Focused Resolution Center, or CFRC, that is currently within the court premises. Now, of course, with COVID and everything, currently this session takes place on Zoom, all right? But it is something that takes place, okay? Now, let me talk about children, because I always want to talk about children before we get into talking about money, okay? So where there's any child below 21 years old, then the divorce court will have to decide on issues of custody, care and control, access, as well as maintenance. Now, what does all these terms mean, right? Custody is basically the decision making for your child, all right? Whether your child goes to overseas university or studies here, all right? If there is a health issue, right? Whether or not your child needs to need a particular type of health care, for example. Issues with respect to religion, for example. So these are all things which are covered under custody, okay? Care and control, on the other hand, is the day-to-day living arrangements for the child. Who is the child going to actually be physically staying with? Because after the divorce, more often than not, in fact, very, very likely, there will be two households, okay? And then, if let's say one party has the care and control, right, then does it mean that the other parent then doesn't get to see the child? The answer is no, okay? It is very important that the children, right, continue to have both parents in their lives. And this is ensured by making sure that even if you're not the care and control parent, you have access to your child. All right, this could be visits, this could be overnight, this could be weekends, this could be school holiday access, etc. Okay. Now, some people might ask, but what if my spouse is violent? All right. In fact, my spouse has been violent even to the child. Is it safe? I don't really want my spouse to have access to the child. Now, even in such situations, right, the law still encourages the child to have a relationship or a future relationship with the father or the mother, all right? But there will be ways to ensure safety. So one of these ways is to order supervised access, all right? So you can have the access take place in a public place, take place in the presence of a welfare officer or at a DSSA, the divorce support agency that I was talking about earlier. Now, maintenance is a responsibility of both parents, and therefore maintenance for the child will also have to be ordered, all right? And that's something the court will take into account. Now, of course, all this is just the legal aspects of it, but we must remember that children are greatly impacted, all right, in matrimonial disputes. And because they don't have a say in the divorce that takes place, right? The decision to divorce is usually made by the two adults, namely their parents. Okay, so because of that, we mustn't forget, all right, that they are the unwilling bystanders to the breakdown of the marriage, and in their eyes, it is the breakdown of the family. Okay, so because of that, we need to be sensitive, and the law is sensitive to the needs of the children who are impacted by divorce, and that is the reason why we have all these mandatory counseling and mandatory mediation. All right, so if you are contemplating that, do spare a thought as to how this is going to have an influence on your children, and even their notion of what marriage is about, right? And whether or not that's an institution they might embrace further on in their adult life. So a lot of these things have long-term impact on the children. So do spare a thought for that. And maybe at Q&A, I can take some questions as to any of the concerns that any of you may have on this. Now, one of the things the court always encourages is co-parenting. Now, some of you may say, look, that's so difficult because I really can't stand the sight of my spouse, which is why we are divorced, okay? But do try and make a sort of mental difference, all right, between what kind of a spouse your spouse or ex-spouse has been, as opposed to the type of parent he or she is. So I always ask my clients when they come to see me and raise children issues, right? Is your spouse a good mother? Is your spouse a good father? And to be fair to them, I think many of them are quite honest about this, okay? Sometimes you may have someone who is hands-off, all right? Hands-off doesn't mean they don't care, okay, for the children, right? They still continue to support the children in their own way, okay? So it may not be in the way that you might feel is ideal, right? It's not something like, what you watch on television, this perfect father or this perfect mother, right? But in their own way, all right, someone can parent. So don't apply your standards, okay? And from the child's point of view, if you ask a child, would they rather not see the parent at all, or at least see the parent some of the time? Most children will say that they would still want to see the other parent. Okay, so bear that in mind in the decisions that you make with respect to children. And parenting comes with both rights and also responsibilities. Okay, so a lot of times parents, especially the parent who is not going to maybe have the day-to-day care of the child, all right, starts thinking about, oh, but I have a right to see the child. Okay, sure. Of course, as parents, you have certain rights. You have rights to make decisions for the child and all. But also don't forget, you have responsibilities. All right, the responsibilities include, caregiving for the child. And the responsibilities include providing financial support, providing emotional support. All right, and also not to behave in a way as to cause the child, all right, to have negative views of the other parent. All right, that's a very important responsibility. all right, that sometimes people forget in the midst of all the anger and all the acrimony that they have towards their other spouse. And of course, the most important message I have is don't put your children in the middle of the conflict, right? As far as possible, right? Try and make sure that your child doesn't feel the impact of the negativity of the conflict. And you'll be surprised. Even very, very young children, all right? A lot of times my clients will tell me, oh, but the child is too young. The child doesn't understand, all right, what's going on. The psychologists, all right, and the studies show, right, that even babies can feel conflict, all right? If you do actual tests, you will find that, in the midst of a quarrel between the parents, all right, if you are to check, all right, you'll find that, the child can actually be impacted even at that very young age, all right? So be very, very conscious of it and don't assume that your child doesn't understand what is going on. I now want to move on to the issue of family violence, all right? And I'm going to, in this area, cover a lot of myths that is out there about family violence, okay? One of the biggest myths is that family violence is only about physical violence. So a lot of times people think, oh, if I don't leave any scars, if I don't leave any injury, all right, or if I've not suffered any injury, I cannot complain about family violence. The answer is no. Okay, a lot of times, especially these days, right, family violence takes the form of psychological abuse, mental abuse, stalking, all right, and even the withholding of benefits, all right, like not providing proper maintenance, etc. Okay, or even directing the violence towards somebody else, like the child or pets, all right, or people you love. Okay, so it is wrong to think that family violence is only physical violence. Okay, now some people also think that there's a certain kind of profile, all right, of perpetrators of family violence. Maybe that comes from watching too much television. Okay, so we all think, oh, it must be somebody who is not educated. It must be somebody, who comes from, who may be poor, etc. Actually, no. You can have very, very sophisticated perpetrators of family violence. All right, they could be professionals. They could be very powerful people. All right, they could be, or a man on the street. Someone who looks very quiet, very docile. All right, or a woman on the street. Okay, could also be a perpetrator. So there is no typical profile, right? Similarly, there is no typical profile that fits victims of family violence. Some people think that the typical victim has to be someone who is weak, someone who is uneducated, someone who is a housewife, all right, who doesn't have a career, right? No, you will find that perfectly, capable people, all right, who hold good jobs and high positions can also be victims of family violence. Okay, so we mustn't have wrong assumptions about that. And many people feel that, look, if you are really a victim of family violence, you will leave. Okay, if it's really violent, you will leave. And therefore, if you don't leave such a relationship or if you don't complain, it means there's no violence. Okay, there's a whole variety of reasons why people don't leave a relationship, including sometimes having children. All right, so they will just tahan, they will just stay on, all right, in a relationship despite the fact it is really very violent. And the other thing, which is a very, very common thing, is myth is family violence is a family affair. Don't be a kipo, it's none of your business. We shouldn't intervene. People will sort it out themselves. Okay, sorry, that's not how it works. All right. Oftentimes, family violence is so scary for the victim, right? They cannot find a way out. Okay, and they do require the rest of us, right? Whether you're a colleague, whether you're a friend, okay, whether you're a neighbor, all right, to look out for the signs, and if possible, extend a helping hand, all right. I remember a very good friend of mine suspecting that her neighbor was suffering, or was victim of family violence. She even put a little flyer, all right, on family violence under the door. Okay, and then at first when she told me that, I said, oh, what if the other party sees it? And she says, never mind. I want the other party to know, all right, that as a neighbor, I am aware. Okay, so it was a fantastic initiative on her part to do it. And it can be something as simple as that. Nobody is asking you to run into the eye of the storm, all right, and rescue the victim. Okay, but it could just be a phone call, all right, to the National Anti-Violence hotline, all right. It could be calling the police if you really hear, a commotion next door, right? Or it could even be if you see a bruise saying, hey, are you okay? Do you need me to help you, take you to the hospital or see a doctor? It could be little things like that that could give courage to the victim. Okay, so have a think about that. And of course, some people say, oh, family violence is about anger management or stress. Okay, oh, it's because that person was under a lot of stress at the time. This person has a difficulty, fighting anger. So I always tell my clients who come and tell me, look, isn't it strange that this person only shows this side of him at home, right? He still goes to work, right? He still holds a job, right? He doesn't, when his boss is angry, when his boss gives him a lot of work to do, does he lash out at the boss? Does he hit the boss? Okay, so you find that it's about choices. Okay, whether or not someone reacts with violence has to do with your own self-control and your own choices as well. Okay, so we should not be making excuses for them. I mean, of course, in some cases, there could be mental health issues. Okay, in which case, then they also need help, right? But let's not make assumptions or excuses for perpetrators of family violence. Okay, and of course, I think you all know, right? There were some recent examples when family violence escalates to such a level that it hits tragedy, right? So I think many of us remember reading in the news about the murder-suicide that took place in Tampines, right? So you will find that those are just examples, all right? Some examples of where violence so that there was a case where there was a PPO, all right, having been given, right, and but notwithstanding that, all right, the entire family ended up in tragic circumstances. Okay, so this is something that I think all of us, right, regardless of whether or not you have experienced it yourself, right, I think many a times we are also unwilling, all right, bystanders who see it. The question is, can you help to do something about it? Now, Patrick mentioned COVID-19, and I think none of us can do any kind of presentation without talking about the issues that have occurred during COVID-19. And in the area of family law, this has also become something, all right, that's been highly relevant. Okay, so all of us remember the lockdown or the circuit breaker, all right, that took place in April, all right, and extended into May, right? This meant there was increased time spent at home, right? And that also led to the increased incidence of family violence, right? As suddenly the abusers and victims found themselves in close proximity 24/7, right? This also had an impact on the victim's help-seeking behavior, because normally if you are a victim of family violence, but you continue to go to work, all right, you could then have access to helpline. You can actually make an appointment, all right, to with a family service center, right? But if you're stuck at home, right, it's going to be pretty difficult, okay? And even though many of these centers operated online, right, it will be pretty hard for you to do that or have access even on Zoom, all right, if the other party is also at home, okay? Then with home-based learning, right, and the closures of childcare facilities, it meant that a lot of times the children were also at home. So this became very difficult, all right, in terms of how you can seek help, whether you have the privacy to have a conversation with a helpliner, for example. Okay, so because more people spend times indoors, right, we found that many of the victims were afraid to reach out for help, right, because they felt that, oh, it's not safe, my abuser will find out. All right, sometimes they are sharing the computer. All right, so even if you send out an email or you get an email reply, right, the other party might find out. Okay, so the other area, of course, is that because of COVID-19, many of the social services were impacted. All right, crisis shelters, some were closed. Divorce support services agencies or DSSAs had to close doors, right, if they were worried about infections, etc. So on the whole, there was a general strain on helplines and social services. So that's why I want to give a shout out to Connect at Pioneer, because what is being done right now, right, despite the fact that we can't all be sitting in a room and having a seminar, they are reaching out to you through this webinar, right, to give you this information, and you are in the safety of your home, right, listening to this and getting the information. So we'll all have to find different ways in which we can help as well as seek help. All right, so don't be afraid to do that. Okay, so just to summarize, right, what I have covered so far, right, Obviously, with recent years, right, there are more and more challenges to Singapore families, all right? We do have a fantastic legal protection framework. I say this as a lawyer of 30 years, right? Over the years, our Women's Charter has been amended. Our MPs have been speaking up in Parliament, right, seeking further changes and improvements, right, to all aspects of the law, okay? So you will find that as a country, as a nation, we have a lot of resources that are being put into ensuring our families are safe and our families are taken care of, right? There's always more to be done, right? But I think if one makes a comparative study of Singapore against many of the jurisdictions in the world, we really should be proud of what it is that we have in our laws. But it's not just about laws, it's also about how that actually works in real life. Okay, and that really depends on all of us coming together, right, and applying it in a way that is practical, that is meaningful, right, and that is equitable. Okay, we do also have, apart from legal agencies, community agencies, right, that reach out and also do their part. Okay, but the recent reforms show that at the end of the day, right, it is all about a question of balance. Okay, we are trying to juggle the roles of the family, the roles of the community, and the roles of society, as well as state intervention. All right, we can't always rely on just saying, look, what is the government going to do about it? What are the courts going to do about it? All right. There are also resources in the community that we need to reach out to. Okay. At the end of the day, family disputes really deals with a balance between traditional values of love, right? Honoring your marital ties, okay? Which are all the kind of lovely things that we all think about when we enter into a marriage, right? Which unfortunately, by the time you make the decision to divorce, all right, to separate, many times people forget, okay? But at the same time, once you become a part of a family, right, it doesn't mean that you then forget about notions of self-esteem, self-love, reliance, as well as resilience. Okay, these are all things which, whether as an individual or as a member of a family or as a parent, right, you will still need in order to sustain your family life. Okay, I have also talked about the myths of family violence and tried to dispel some of them. So have a bit of a think, right, of what I've said about this and see if you have actually encountered these kind of issues. Have you yourself actually believed in some of these myths? Maybe it's time to question some of them, all right? And finally, it is also ensuring that as a nation, we have resources that are available to meet not just financial needs and improved living conditions, but also looking at challenges that have been brought about by technology, all right, and other forms of violence that can take place online, all right, cyberbullying, etc. So these are all extreme challenges that we have. Okay, I'll be very, very happy to take questions later on any of this. Finally, I want to give a shout out to the role of social service agencies, all right, such as the communities, of which Pioneer Constituency is one of them, right? We all have a role in contributing to research, to awareness and advocacy, and also to action and services, all right? In Singapore, we have police management of cases where it comes to family violence. We have the Family Justice Courts, that is a dedicated court that deals with issues of family. We have community services such as family service centers, PAVE, which is a center for promoting alternatives to violence. We have a Trans-Safe Center, we have crisis shelters. There are also healthcare facilities and schools outreach. So at every different portion of your life, right, there could be a suitable social service agency that is there to help. So whether you are someone who needs help or you're someone who can ensure that somebody else needs help, remember there are also these other agencies and not just the courts and the police. Now, I've put up here some useful resources. Okay, Patrick mentioned the Law Society pro bono services that I'm very happy to be associated with. all right, there is some information, all right, at the Law Society website that is available to the public, including this book that you see in orange called Know the Law Now. Okay, it actually gives you a lot of the things that I've already said, all right, is found there, and there's a new edition that's going to be coming out. The Family Justice Courts also has lots of brochures and publications to help you in the area of specific things like adoptions and divorce and maintenance, etc. So you can have a look, the links are there, all right? If you need some kind of counseling, all right, or help on marital and parenting issues, I've also put a link there to the Community Psychology Helps online counseling platform that you can reach out to. And finally, I think you have seen in the news that just a few weeks ago, all right, we launched a nationwide national anti-violence helpline, right, or NEVH. And that helpline is something that you can call, all right, if you chance upon seeing some kind of violent behavior. Okay, great. So that's basically what I have for you. This is where I practice, all right, and I want to thank again Pioneer for this opportunity. I'll be very happy to take any questions that anybody would have. Thank you very much.
So a big thank you to Malathi for enlightening us, and in the last 40 minutes.
Oh, did I take so long?
Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
No, it's perfect. I mean, it's lots of information. As you know, the breadth and the depth of family law is so, so great. And you really can't say everything in the 40 minutes.
Yeah, it covers cradle to the grave, you
literally.
see.
But more importantly, Malathi shared towards the end of her sharing that there are lots of resources out there. To know the law. I know it's a fantastic publication. You can in fact offload it or download it for easy reading. Very, very layman language. And of course, I'm glad to hear that the next edition is coming up.
Yes, that's right.
And yes, she's absolutely correct. I think the family courts have come up with a lot of brochures and easy to read guides. On top of that, if you really, after trying to navigate all this, still need to hear from someone, so we still have our legal clinics. They're available both at NTUC, here in Frontier Community Club for our Pioneer residents, and of course with the Law Society Pro Bono Services Office across Singapore, for which Malathi is a firm advocate. But maybe just to kick off, and I have here also Catherine, who is our community volunteer.
Hey, Catherine.
Yeah, so we are here to use the last 10 or 15 minutes or so to pose some interesting questions which we have from some of the viewers here. We'll be posting comments, and of course from the residents' feedback, and of course some of them who have seen some of us when they are facing some disputes at home. So maybe I just kick off one interesting question that has been popping up. I know some people enter into a marriage sometimes to buy a HDB flat, and then realize that they actually are not really meant for each other. So you talked about divorce. I also hear young couples only do a annulment, a nullity of sorts.
Right.
Maybe you're going to share with us what's this nullity?
Okay, sure. Yeah, actually there are quite a lot of reported cases about this idea of people having contracted marriage, for other purposes. Okay, but I like to think that you don't just get married to someone just to get a HDB flat.
Yeah.
Okay, there must be some other reason, as well as that. But probably because they then contracted maybe in a bit of a hurry, right, without thinking too much about it, because they think, I need to show my application and all that in order to put in my application for HDB. But coming to the point about nullity, remember earlier I mentioned that within the first 3 years of marriage, you cannot divorce. Remember there was this thing, right? So you got to tahan a bit, get used to the person, etc., etc. So because of that, if you really, really find, right, that it's been a mistake, okay, to ask a person to wait for 3 years is quite a long time. Okay, so of course, Patrick wearing his MP hat might be able to make some push for some legislative changes. But barring that, the current law is first 3 years you can't file, right, unless it's very rare exceptional circumstances. On the other hand, nullity, all right, or to basically put an end to your marriage by saying that it is not valid, all right, it's that it's null and void, is something that can be done without having to wait out the 3 years, which is why you see people trying to find it, okay? But in the same way that divorce needs reasons, nullity also needs reasons, okay? Yeah. So cannot just go and say, I cannot get along, I don't want my I want to sell my HDB. So for nullity, one of the common reasons is, so for example, if you have not consummated your marriage, okay, and the reason you have not consummated your marriage is because the other party is not willing to consummate, all right? Basically have relations as husband and wife, right? And some of the reasons given is because we are fairly a traditional society, right? So a lot of people just going and doing an ROM, even though legally that is actually your marriage, right? They still have things like, the tea ceremony, they still have the temple wedding, they still have church, right? And all these things that they may need to do, right? So in some cases, they ROM, they apply for HDB, right? But they still, for some reason, because things have not worked out, they don't want to go through the traditional ceremony. And the understanding that the couple may have had is that they will not consummate their marriage. They will not have sex unless we go through the proper traditional ceremony. Okay, so those are one of those exceptional reasons that people have come to court with. But of course, please you must also know that it's a court hearing, right? So you cannot make up stories, all right? If you have consummated your marriage, you can't come and try and lie to the court and say I haven't consummated. Okay, so there are ways and means to find out these things, right? And you can be put to having to prove certain things. So of course, this is therefore an available thing to answer your question, Patrick. But of course, as a lawyer, if I had someone come to me and say this is the reason, I will of course also have a duty to ensure that that is indeed the truth. Okay, and if you are the person who is going to assert it, okay, remember that you will have to sign an affidavit that says everything that you're putting in the court documents is true, right? So I would be very, very careful to advise my client to make sure that the facts indeed support what it is that you're saying.
Yeah. We received some questions from the residents. You shared quite a fair bit about family violence and all that.
Yeah.
Maybe can you tell us, like, in the event of family violence, what should a lady do?
Okay. Well, family violence can also take place to a man. So let me just say that first.
In the event of family violence, what should a person do then?
Okay. Yeah. No, because as a woman advocate, I always get that, like, are you saying that, the Women's Charter only for women? So let me lay that clearly. All right. Firstly, family violence can also take place. Remember I mentioned one of the myths, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for giving a concrete example. So if someone is a victim of family violence, or you suspect that you have become a victim of family violence, okay, obviously if there was physical violence, all right, please report it, okay, and then seek medical attention, all right, because of course if you want to take it further, all right, you will have to provide proof, okay. So if it's, let's say if it's just a bruise or something, just take a photo. These days with everyone's got a camera, right? Yeah, so you can take a photo. So make sure that you have proof, right? Have a dated proof to show when and when, and then make a report, because for all you know, there may be a repeat. Okay. Now then after that, the simple way of doing it is you can apply for a personal protection order in the courts. Okay. This can be done online. All right. You can
on their own?
Yeah. Okay. Online. If you have a SingPass, okay, you can actually file an online application, right? And then there are also you can go to certain family service centers that actually have an online thing. So I would suggest you do that if you can. Okay, so now we're not in circuit breaker, so at least you can, visit some of these places. The reason why I would suggest you do that is because when you go to a family service center, you get the counseling support, as well, because a lot of people find it very intimidating to just go to the police station or to go to the court, So that's something else you can do. Then of course,
and the best thing is right here in Pioneer Constituency, we have 2 of these so-called counselling of family service
oh,
centre.
fantastic.
We have Whispering Hearts right here in Pioneer, as well as Tai Hwa Kwan, which is just down
Oh,
the
yes,
road.
that's right. Okay. Yeah, so you can use that, all right. And of course, all else fails, you can go to the family court itself. Okay, so the family court also will have. So why I say all this is because it depends on different needs, all right. Sometimes it may not be convenient to do it online at home. Okay. Sometimes you might need interpreter, right? Could be someone who needs it to be interpreted. Because what we want to make sure is that everything that you say is true and can be supported, right? So we don't want to have any kind of miscommunication.
Yes.
So if you're not comfortable with the English language to do an online application yourself, then I would suggest you do that. And then as Patrick says, there are so many free legal clinics around, right? You may also want to follow up by going to a free legal clinic and where the lawyers can actually tell you what the process is going to be like. Yeah.
Thanks so much for that. There's actually another question. Those in the event of divorce, right, where would the children typically go to? Is that like definitely goes to the mom or would definitely go to the dad?
Okay, so of course, remember what I said right at the start, if the parties can have an agreement, okay, the court will, as far as possible, give effect to that. All right, so if you can sit down with your spouse and work out how it's going to happen, that's great. So it always starts off with try and come to an agreement yourself, okay? Because then you determine, you don't leave it to chance, as to, the judge making the decision for you. But if it comes down to it that you actually have to then have to take it to court, there are various factors that the court will look at, okay? Such as who has been the one who's been taking care of the child all this time, okay? How old is the child? Right? What are the needs of the child? I mean, say for example, I give you a very obvious example. It's a baby which is being breastfed. Who do you think the child is more likely to go to, right? And again, the question is not an issue of a fight between the father and mother, who is better, okay? The issue is always what is in the child's best interest, okay? So giving you the baby example, right? Here is a baby who is being breastfed. What is in the best interest? Who should be the one who is looking after this baby? Okay. In some cases, you may have supporting family. So, for example, the in-laws on this side is also helping to look after. So then it might go down that stream because the court is interested in knowing who has been the primary caregiver. Because we don't want to suddenly transplant. Because I use the word transplant as if it's a plant, right? Yeah, they are not plants. Okay, they are not plants. So even pets, you don't just suddenly pick up the pet and say move to another house. So much less children, right? So you have to always think about, what is the child comfortable with? What has the child been used to? Where is the school, for example, right? Because if let's say the school is here, right, and then suddenly you want to, move and all that. So these are all factors that the court will take into account. The age of the child is important, right? If they are teenagers, right, there may be certain other considerations, The general rule is the court will not split up kids. So if they are siblings, right, they will try as far as possible to put the siblings together, right? Because already, the parents are split up. So, you don't want to. So I always tell my clients, they are not furniture, It's not you take one, I take one. Okay. So, no, but sometimes, no, it's not because they are being mean, all right? It's not because they're being mean. It's just that at that point of time, you are in this space, all right? And then you think, okay lah, I tell you what lah, fair lah, huh? You take one, I take one. It's not because they are not, they're wanting to be mean to the children, okay? But it could just be a sense of some kind of fairness, or justice. So I think for those of us who are in the community advising our clients, we need to create that awareness in their part, right? That it's not just about yourself, it's also about how your children will feel.
So that brings me to the next question, right? So it seems that the financial standing of the parents doesn't take effect, right? I mean, not so much considered.
No.
But when it comes to divorce, there would be splitting of financial assets. So is it naturally 50-50 or how is that being considered?
Okay. Under our law, it's not automatically 50-50. Okay. So in the civil law countries, all right, like in Europe and all that, it is 50-50. There's this notion of community of property. In Singapore, it really depends on contributions. Okay. And the contributions are not just financial contributions. Okay, so oftentimes you will hear the more financially able person saying, oh, but I paid for everything. I paid for 100%. So I should be getting 100% or I should be getting 99%. Okay, that's not the answer. Okay, so the court will take into account factors like what about indirect contributions? Okay, if you've been, if the parties after marriage decided that the wife was going to be a homemaker, all right, and she gives up her career to be a homemaker for the next 30 years, then it's not fair to say at the end of the divorce, hey, you go back to work lah. You know, you should go and earn your keep and you know, but I brought 100% to it, so I should be keeping the 100%, right? So the court is, family law is very fair, okay? It takes into account the fact that it is also about your other contributions. So you've been taking care of the children, you've been taking care, or if there are no children, you've been taking care of the in-laws, the aged parent, you know, these are all relevant, right? If you've been doing the housework, if you've contributed in other ways, okay? So for example, if you have a very high achieving spouse, right? And the other spouse is the one who will organize the parties, who will go for the, you know, to do the entertainment, you know, so all of those things contribute because it helps in the career of the other party, right? If the other party is one whose job is always causing him to travel, right? And then this person has to therefore take care of the kids, take care of the household, make sure everything goes on smoothly. That is also contributing to ensure you have your peace of mind to travel and become a high-flying CEO or whatever, you know? So these are all things that at the end of the day, right, the court will take into account because it's when we are together, we don't think about it, right? I'm not going to like say, hey, you cannot, why you always travel? Why I'm the one left to do this? No, we do it because it's for the family, right? So at the time of divorce, it is then not fair to say, I just take the benefit, I don't take the responsibility. Yeah, does that help you answer?
Oh, that helps. What about if let's say it's agreed that there should be certain amount of dollars alimony per month,
Okay.
but the other person sort of like didn't fulfill their obligations?
Okay, so when it comes to maintenance and alimony, right, one of the factors that the court will look at is what was the standard of living of the family during the marriage, okay? So it's not fair to say, like, say if during the marriage, you know, they had, enough that they were taking yearly holidays, you know, they always had nice food at the restaurants. And then after that, at the point of divorce, it says, oh no, now you go and eat in the hawker center. Now, you know, you only get to do staycation in Singapore. You know, you only get to go to Sentosa. We can't bring the children, you know, overseas or whatever. So these are all the kind of things the court will be looking at because, like I said, family law is about fairness. You know, it is about being, if the marriage hadn't broken down, how would your family have continued to live? Okay, and it's not fair to say, now that it's broken down, all bets are off. Okay, I now want to keep everything for myself. Okay.
Okay, so one last question. I know it's we're gonna wrap up shortly. So one final question for Malathi since she's here. We talked about earlier divorce, but there's also something about separation.
Yes.
You touched a bit on it about the separation deed and what you can or cannot do or should not do during a separation, whether you live together or not. Maybe you want to share a bit about this alternative route to before a divorce.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pat, because I find more and more people also sometimes feel uncomfortable having to accuse the other party of bad behaviour. So separation is a non-fault kind of based thing, okay? So if you're not in a mighty big hurry, okay, to want to go and remarry, right? Or if you've already lived separately, right, that's an option, okay? Now, of course, in Singapore, when you say live separately, does that mean I have to stay in 2 different households? The answer is no, okay? So separation basically means living separate and apart. In the Singapore context, oftentimes it means living in separate bedrooms, all right? I tell my clients, think of it as if it's the relationship of a roommate or a housemate, okay? Where you have, because of financial reasons, you still live under the same roof, okay? You are still contributing your CPF towards the payment of the housing loan, right? So of course, it doesn't make sense for you to go out and rent, you know? But live separately, if you don't do things for each other, okay? If you don't live as man and wife, obviously if you don't have sex and there's no marital relations, all right, that is of course one of the criteria, okay? But it also includes other things, you know? Now, sometimes if you already have children, right, people might just keep up appearances. They might still do things with the children, for example, you know, like the school holidays, you know, they may take the children out. But as far as vis-a-vis husband and wife, you know, they don't do anything that a husband would do for the wife and the wife would do for a husband, right, it will still constitute separation. Okay, so that's a possible ground on which you can go on without then having to say, so and so did this and so did that.
Thanks, Malathi, and,
No worries.
and Catherine as well for her very ground questions, some very close to many of our residents' hearts. Again, we come to the end of today. Oh, time really flies. It's more than an hour already.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in. It's a very, very useful, very, very informative, very enriching session. I thought for those of you who have watched this, we've been following us on this, do like and share this Facebook post. At the same time, also do share it. We'll try to have as many watch parties as possible so that more can benefit from the useful information that we have here. And like I said, we're coming towards the end of today's Connect and Pioneer session, part of the LEAD initiative, as well as partnering with the labour movement, because this is one of the topics that come up quite frequently at our legal clinics, both at NTUC as well as here in Frontier Community Club. So we especially had Malathi here with us, so a big thank you to Malathi for spending your Saturday with us. Yeah, and after hearing from here, I can see that being a family lawyer is not an easy thing. I did family law, but never practiced it. But she's 30 years. It's no mean feat. Definitely not easy because it's a very emotional, very, very sensitive, but also very important topic. And I'm sure she has helped many families part in a very amicable way. At the same time, also help them to reunite in an amicable way as well. And for those of you out there who are tuning in, I hope you all can do a short feedback for our Connect and Pioneer. We'll be flashing this QR code. Scan this, do us a favor, let us know what kind of other topics that you want to hear or see or watch from us, so that we can come up with useful topics, table topics that will benefit you through this short legal primers. Yeah, so this is the QR code again, and I would like to thank each and every one of you who have been tuning in the past hour. Do like and share, whether you're watching it from the Pioneer Community Facebook page or my community Facebook page, or subsequently from other of our pages where we are sharing this very useful session that we have here, brought to each and every one of you by Pioneer Constituency, supported by the labour movement. So yes, we have come to the end of today's session. Again, a big thank you to our community volunteer, Catherine, as well as Malathi. Really a big thank you, and we wish you well in your endeavours. And I know you're doing a lot of other things. Now even teaching, the lawyers of tomorrow. Yeah. So a big thank you to Malathi, and once again, big thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend ahead.